Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. Sorry about the technical difficulties on my end, but let's dive right into the slides. This talk is about basically everything you need to know about Bug Bounty. So even if you have heard of it, but you don't really know about it, well, then this talk is for you. If you're someone who's trying to get into Bug Bounty, this is a talk for you. If you're someone who basically is a bug bounty hunter yourself, but you want to know a little bit more about your rights and whatnot, this is a talk for you. So basically it will help and cover anyone who wants to know anything about bug bounty and the legal landscape. So let's dive into my slides. I will turn off my camera so I can focus on my slides, and then we'll go straight from there. All right, here we go. All right. Can everyone see my slides? I will take that as a yes. All right, so welcome. We're gonna talk about Gotta Catch 'Em All Bug Bounty. For those that don't know who I am, my name is Messdaghi. I'm the VP of Strategy over at Point 3 Security. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also the president and co-founder of WOSEC. I also head the SF Bay Area chapter, and we just did a bug bounty workshop just last week with Katie Paxton Fear, also known as Insider PhD. I'm also the founder of Women Hackers, and when I'm not running those things, I'm also an organizer for the Hacker Book Club. And if you're wondering what is a Hacker Book Club, it's basically we read books that are written by the hacker community, and the hacker community reads them all together. So every month we read a new book, and right now we're reading Cult of the Dead Cow. We do have our meetings every Tuesday virtually at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You're more than welcome to always join us. When I'm not doing that, I'm also a podcaster for ITSP Magazine's The Uncommon Journey with Phil Wiley and Alyssa Miller. We basically cover everyone's stories of how they got into InfoSec, how they stay within InfoSec, and what the advice that they've gotten. And yes, I am a parent to Sherlock and Luna, which are two Shibas. Maybe if you are fortunate, you might see them later. All right, let's dive into this good content. So what we're going to talk about is what, the why, and the how of bug bounty. So in case of those that are not familiar with bug bounty and what it does exactly, we'll dive into that first. And of course, if you've seen any of my other talks, I always dive a little bit into the brain because I'm obsessed with the brain, and it's really good to know how your brain works to be able to understand why we do what we do. We'll dive a little bit into the history of bug bounty and a little bit about what is the current landscape when you are practicing bug bounty. And even if you are a hacker yourself, what are your rights you need to know? Best tools, and then also how to get started will be in the session. So what is bug bounty? Bug bounty is basically a transaction between submitting a bug and getting paid. And why do we need it? Because companies need an outsider's eyes and mindsets to find vulnerabilities, hence the need for crowdsourced security to keep everyone safe. So in other words, think about it this way. We all have different backgrounds, different way of processing information, different ways of looking at the world and what we live in. And that actually impacts on whether we'll find a vulnerability that someone would not catch. So that's why it's important to have crowdsourcing your type of security, so then you can be even more sure that even if your team doesn't catch something, they have basically someone else who can. Now, it's important to note that bug bounty was never created and still is not to be used ever to replace anyone on your security team. It still is important to invest in your security team. Bug bounty is just something you do on the side as extra precaution and for extra layer of safety. But you must invest into your own security team. Do not fully rely ever on outside sources, in my opinion. So how does it work exactly? Depending on how critical the bug is, the amount of paid out is actually higher. And then sometimes it's just, swag, sometimes it's thank yous and whatnot. Just note that it has to be within scope. You do not go out of scope in bug bounty. So just remember that, and definitely do never, ever, ever exploit. And you'll hear me say that term quite often. So let's dive a little bit about how our brains are stimulated by them. Besides dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins being created through gamification such as Bug Bounty, our brains are really stimulated by them. So we're going to get to know your brain just a little bit more. So what I want you to do is focus on that green part on the left side, the temporal lobe right there. Now within the temporal lobe has the amygdala and hippocampus. Those two are the most important things when it comes to gamification. So we'll get to dive a little bit into more, but let's first dive into the temporal lobe. So the temporal lobe is involved in processing sensory input into derived meanings for their appropriate retention of visual memory, language comprehension, and emotion association. It is where gamification thrives and where the amygdala and hippocampus are. So when you're doing gamification, these are the two parts that are active the most. The amygdala, which works to control your emotional response and helps your brain store memories. For example, when you have dreams in the middle of the night, chances are you might not remember most of them, but you tend to always remember the terrible, terrible dreams because there is a fear associated with it. And because there is fear in there, you will recall it because it was something scary or traumatic in the middle of your deep sleep. So one of the things to note about the amygdala, it is your fear response mechanism. So your fight versus flight mechanism is completely subconscious, but it's where all your emotions are stored. And it's connected to your hippocampus, which stores your short-term memories that end up becoming long-term memories later on in the temporal lobe. Now, the hippocampus plays a really huge role when it comes to memory, navigation, and emotional response. So, for example, every time you are trying to get home, your hippocampus is running on that and is acting like your GPS system. Now, if you take a different route home, it will still be able to try to help you figure out and navigate how to get there. It's the same thing when it comes to learning new things. So when we learn a new tool, we apply it. Now, the hippocampus is there to help apply it. So instant knowledge, application processed. And whenever there's a timer being set, like Bug Bounty does, you want to be the first one to deliver your vulnerability, right? Because you don't want to get that message saying duplicate. It's one of the most painful things in the world because you're like, I just spent so long finding this and writing up this report. And yeah, so the whole thing is that the amygdala helps you when it comes to your timing. And it's the thing that triggers you to want to go faster and get this thing. And the hippocampus helps you remembering tools and how to quickly respond to things. So we know why our brain loves it now. But let's be real. How and when did it first start? Any guesses, years? Okay, well, it started on October 10th, 1995. Netscape launched the very first bug bounty program by offering cash rewards to those who were able to find security bugs in their Netscape Navigator 2.0 beta. And this in itself, this timeline, it was taken from Katie Mazuris's presentation of the history of bug bounties. And it was created from Bug Crowd, and she presented at the O'Reilly conference, I think in 2018. But overall, what I want to do is kind of look at how this worked. Now, I know HackerOne isn't on here and Synac isn't on here, but it is between 2012, 2013 for those two. But what I want us to look at is in 1995, when Netscape did that, other companies started realizing, hey, this might be a good thing to do. And then so other companies started their own bug bounty programs, and then learning as they go along. How does this work? How can we make this better? And then it came to a point where a lot of people started doing bug bounties. And at that time, it was a lot of work to have someone manage it and to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So basically platforms like Bugcrowd, Synac, and HackerOne came about as, I hate using the term middleman, but basically they are the company that connects hackers with companies. So hackers can get paid and also share vulnerabilities in a legal way. And companies would receive these submissions and vulnerabilities so then they can fix the issues that their security team may have missed. And of course, it started growing. As you can see here, majority of these companies actually have their own bug bounty program, but then they also work with BugCrowd, Echo, and Synac as well. Now, the thing about the birth of bug bounty platforms is due to the Netscape and the ongoing need of bug bounty programs to keep them even more safe, in 2012, the 3 main bug bounty programs were formed. But the thing you should note about it that makes me so proud of them is that they were the ones to push vulnerability disclosure programs, basically having a safe way to report a vulnerability without having to worry about prosecution as long as you stay within scope and you do not exploit. And this was a game changer moment because at that time, then government started trusting hackers more. And now we have hacked the Pentagon, hacked the Army, hacked the Navy, hacked the Air Force. And really it was because these bug bounty programs started showing that, hey, hackers are good people. Yes, they're cyber criminals, but that's not what we're here to focus on. We're focused on hackers, people that are trying to protect and serve, keeping everyone safe. And they do it out of curiosity. But the sad part about it is that even with bug bounty programs and also vulnerability disclosure programs, they've become bigger than ever before. And the more bigger companies take on bug bounty programs and they find resources to do so, the thing is that there's still not enough work here. Not all the Forbes Global 2000 have a vulnerability disclosure program or policies. And so this is a huge issue because that still means that there's a lack of trust. And with this lack of trust, we're still dealing with a huge legal situation. And so this is why we're going to have to talk about the current landscape, because it's one of the things that, unfortunately, being a hacker or working with hackers, it is up to us to push for change to happen. But the only way we're going to do that is by getting public awareness. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we need hackers. So then we can explore that together, then dive into the laws. And I know it's a scary subject, but I promise you, it's something that everyone needs to know. So if you guys remember Equifax, there was a huge breach that happened. And this is usually the point where I'm like, raise your hand. And if you're at your desk right now or at your home and you're on your computer, you're still in your PJs or lounge pants, raise your hand, because honestly, Equifax breach impacted many of us. Actually more than 147 million Americans. But did you know a security researcher warned Equifax that it was vulnerable to a kind of attack that later compromised the personal data of more than 147 million Americans? Motherboard reported this. 6 months after the researcher first notified the company about the vulnerability, Equifax then patched it, but only after the massive breach that made headlines had already taken place. Which is terrible because if they listen, we may have not had this problem. Now, Capital One is another case where basically, according to the federal complaint, the breach took place in stages across March and April 2019, but Capital One only became aware of the problem on July 17th when a security researcher tipped the company to a public GitHub page that was displaying something that looked awfully like private Capital One data. But the thing that we need to understand is, what if no one reported the breach? Any of these? There's breaches that happen all the time, but many of them could have been stopped. But the problem is that only 60% of security researchers do not report vulnerabilities. That means there's 40% that take the risk of reporting it. And if you're wondering what you mean by risk, Chloe, well, it's because the fear of prosecution. This statistic was actually discovered by the hard work of Amit Elzari that you see in the bottom corner there. She noticed that our laws were preventing good hackers from doing what they do best, protecting you and me and everyone that we love. She has been spearheading the movement towards safe harbor, or at least to have transparent documentation, public policy, and as well as disclosure ways, so then you can have hackers report vulnerability without having to fear about being prosecuted. That means they're trying to do something that's good, right? But getting prosecuted out of that is not fair to anyone. I mean, we're just protecting people, right? At the end of the day, hey, you have this vulnerability. I just want you to know about it because I think protecting people's personal identifiable information, PII, I think that would be the best way forward, right? So the thing is that there's many reasons why people are scared to report vulnerability. And usually it's because the prosecution, also looking for contact information is a nightmare. Let's be real. I don't know about any of you guys, but sometimes when you want to report a vulnerability, you're looking around for an email address. This could take hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks. And then you get to the point where you're like, is it worth it? Because I'm already putting my neck on the line to report something. Now, the other thing is reading policies have also been a burden to reporting vulnerabilities. Sometimes these are elongated, basically text. And some people, English is not their first language. And it's already hard because usually there's legal jargon in there. So how are you supposed to understand it? We're not lawyers, and just thought I should let you guys know, I'm not a lawyer. I did want to become an attorney, but then I realized it wasn't for me. But this is one of the favorite cases that I have. This one is someone who reported a bug bounty, and we're going to dive into this story. I don't know if you guys know who DJI is, but they're a drone manufacturer, and they launched a bug bounty program a few years ago. And two researchers, Sean Mella and Kevin Feinsteer, who you see in this photo, they wanted to make sure that everything that they were about, anything that they would report on or anything like that, to scope to see whether or not it's reportable and they won't be prosecuted. They looked for a scope. So their bug bounty program was something that they were trying to run on their own. All right, so they didn't work with BugCrowd, HackerOne, or any of those. They basically like, oh, let's start our own bug bounty program. And the bug bounty program covers all security issues in firmware, application, and servers, including source code leak, security workaround, and privacy issue. Those are all within scope. Now, they were working on basically a detailed user guide for it, and he basically wanted to confirm with DJI that all these following things were in scope before he would report or do anything. So he sent an email, and it took them 2 weeks to finally confirm the scope. He then reported the vulnerability, and he was provided with $30,000 for the finding. However, the agreement of receiving it offered no legal protection for him, so he walked away. Now, the revelations resulted in the company challenging the researchers' findings and seemingly threatening one with a lawsuit tied to the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, the CFAA, claiming he went out of scope regardless to the fact that he made sure to confirm the scope. In return, he posted the entire situation with all conversations with DJI publicly. And I mean, you can find this on his blog. It is embarrassing for DJI because in the email chain, I kid you not, you can read it, is that in there, the PR team over there said that this could be a bad case for this if this came out in public. He's causing us trouble. We need to threaten him. And when they sent an email follow-up to him, the person didn't realize that that email was in the chain itself. So he actually got a hold of that, and he posted it all over his blog, every single email communication. And I'll be real with you, of course, they dropped it in the end because it was embarrassing. But he was very fortunate because there are a lot of people out there that are prosecuted even if they stay within scope. Overall takeaway from all these stories is that there are laws right now that are preventing good hacking in the same way they prevent bad hacking. And we need good hacking in this world more than ever before. So we're going to talk a little bit about the anti-hacking legal landscape. So anti-hacking laws, basically this is a law that prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or an excessive authorization, and is also used when a researcher goes out of scope. This is the act used to prosecute hacking majority of the time. And in the US, we call it the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA. It was a US cybersecurity bill that was enacted in 1984 as an amendment to existing computer fraud law, which had been included in the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. Now, the really interesting fact about this law was that, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie War Games, but if you haven't, you must watch it. It's one of my favorite hacker movies out there. But basically, Ronald Reagan at the time, he watched it and he completely freaked out about hackers. And then he was like, we need to do something about this. We need to prevent from these terrible kids. And so that's why CFA happened. It's because he watched War Games. Interesting fact, right? Now, anti-circumvention laws, these are also known as copyright laws. In Canada, it's called the Copyright Act. But in the US, we call it the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Now, basically what it means is the right to repair. Reverse engineering is seen as a breach of property to some companies. Now, last but not least, we have to always go into acceptable use policy. I don't know about you, but have you ever really read the terms and conditions for any Apple products or anything? Now, I think maybe once or twice, right? We could be real right now. Maybe none of us have. We probably kind of looked at it and it's like, well, you already own my soul as it is. I don't need to really respond to this. So the thing is that overall, it tends to be very long, a lot of too much verbiage, and it can confuse anyone. And I mean, I've tried a few times and I got really, really bored. So I decided to watch a movie instead. But it's even harder, once again, if English is not your first language. And this is something that is important because it's written by attorneys to protect themselves. And you yourself as a consumer, you're not an attorney. So it's not protecting you. But overall, there is a community consensus. Overall, the language of what is in scope and out of scope when disclosing or how do I disclose can be so scary, and potential indictments especially, and it can keep both parties awake at night. That means the program manager and also the hacker themselves or the hunter. It really does keep people awake at night. It does for me, I'll tell you that. I remember the first time and I felt like I had insomnia for a couple of days thinking someone was going to break down my door. So overall, program managers, they're basically asking to be hacked or whatnot, but they're asking not to get hacked badly, and how to conduct and handle situations when researchers report something that is something that, usually the third party deals with. But I just want you to know is that the US is totally down for hacking as long as it's done within scope and not exploit. So just remember I said a little bit earlier today on this talk, if you're going to do anything, please stay within scope and don't you ever exploit, because when you exploit, you're making it bad for everyone in the community because the trust is already so thin as it is. So I know that was hard to talk about. So here's a picture of a bunch of puppies because puppies are amazing. And if you're a cat lover, I am so sorry. Cats are adorable too, but let's be real, puppies are cute too. I will next time maybe put a cat photo in there. But in the meantime, I'm a dog owner. So, but I want you to also know there are some good news. I mean, there are companies right now starting to look into VDPs, which are vulnerability disclosure policies or programs. And they are working to improve their legal language, making it shorter, making it more specific, not using some crazy legal jargon, instead using something that's very simple and plain and gets to the point. And one of the things that you can look into is this thing called disclose.io. It's a really great resource. And the reason for that is that it provides basically a list of all different companies that are practicing and protecting hackers as long as they stay within scope and not exploiting. They state what their security email address is. So if you want to report a vulnerability, it has their contact information. It also lists what to expect, if any rewards, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and their policy links as well. So if you are going to participate, these are things you should know. And that's something that we need. And also, if you are a program manager and you're watching this, please respond to people because people want to know, what are the updates? I want to know, did you fix that thing or did you not? So this is something we all want to know. So now you have the background. Now you're probably wondering, how do I get started? Well, I'm glad that you asked this question. Well, the first thing you need to know is Burp Suite. You need to download it, and you don't need the pro, okay? I really want people to understand this. Even the top bug bounty hunters still use community. So just download the free copy, which is Burp Suite Community. You need to know it very well, meaning the in and outs, because it's gonna be your best friend when hunting. And get on Portswigger Academy. It's going to be very useful for you to understand Burp Suite, and they do provide a good number of educational modules that can help you get there. The other thing is read. I know sometimes you guys don't like to read. It's okay, it's old school. But there's the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, 2nd edition. It is out of date per se. You can actually find a more revised version by just going to Portswigger Academy. So that's why I tend to recommend it. But I like to have the book there. It has good memories, and it just sits there and smiles at me on my bookshelf. Now, the other 2 books are by Peter Yaroski, also known as Pete Yaroski. He wrote 2 really good books. The first one was Web Hacking 101, which is a really well-known one. And then last year he came out with Real World Bug Hunting, which seems to be pretty good as a people pleaser and for understanding even further details. Now, of course, there's studies, but because I believe in, gamification and so on, there's interactive ones, believe it or not. So HackerOne has a one-on-one and including a CTF that you can do. And basically it teaches you in and outs of very basics of getting into bug bounty to advanced, but also getting to know Burp Suite a little bit more. So HackerOne one-on-one is really good for that. The other one is Bug University. They also have educational modules to teach you anything from beginner to advanced materials. And then you have Portswigger Academy, which once again, you should be on that if it's your first time ever using Burp Suite. They do a really good job. And of course, the most important step is taking action. Just do it. That means sign up on HackerOne and BugCrowd. And if you're wondering, Chloe, which one is better? Well, I hate to break it to you, but every single bug bounty hunter is on both of them. So just get on them. And also, if you're interested in learning more about these things, support and check out companies that care about your rights as a hacker by going to disclose.io, which is a great site and a good reference so you know which companies are practicing more quote unquote safe harbor. And by safe harbor, I mean it's actually really very basically a bilateral trust agreement between the company and the hacker that they will stay within scope and they will not exploit, and in return, the company will not prosecute them. So overview. Now, if you want to get in bug bounty, sign up for HackerOne and or BugCrowd. Download Burp Suite Community. It is free. You don't have to pay for it. Don't even think about, oh, I need to get pro though. No, you don't need to get that. You get it some other time. I mean, I think it's over $400 now. So you really don't need it when you're first starting out. When you start getting really, really good at it, sure, you can look into Burp Suite Pro, but Burp Suite Community is what many people use still. Know your rights and what companies are supporting ethical hackers. This is so important because if I'm trying to decide between 2 companies to purchase something, I actually want to know how many of them are actually practicing vulnerability disclosure programs or have a bug bounty program. And if they do, I tend to actually purchase things from them, even if it's a little bit more. But it's important to know whatever you're buying, it's like a vote in a sense. So know that for sure. Last but not least, study and read. Your web application handbook, once again, you do not need it, but it's nice for nostalgic feeling. You can actually get it on Portswigger Academy. You can find out the more latest things. Web Hacking 101 and Bug Bounty by Peter Yaroski is going to be one of your best friends. Check out education platforms like HackerOne 101, BugCrowd University, Portswigger Academy once again, and sign the ethical rights petition. You see the link right there, it's a change thing. But if you follow me on Twitter, or if you looked up my profile, it's the one that's pinned at the very top. If you can sign that, that'd be great, because the more signatures we have, the more of a fight we got. And basically this petition itself, it protects you. It also gets companies to get involved. It reminds the press that hackers are not bad people. There's these things called cyber criminals, that they should focus more on using that term instead. And also that we don't always wear black hoodies and wear a ski mask, because to be honest, I don't think I've ever worn a ski mask indoors. It doesn't make sense. Come on, it's itchy. I don't know if anyone else wears ski masks, and if you dry skin, it's super sensitive. It's not fun. And also you could just cover your camera, let's be real. Anyway, so check that out. And usually I stop right here, but because this is an event where I know there are many women that are watching this, it's important that we also talk about the thing that we need to talk about. And that is the situation with women in bug bounty. So in 2018, BugCrowd came out with a report stating that only 4% of women that identified that they're women are hackers in the world. Now, I don't know how accurate that is today because it's very hard sometimes. We don't want to mark that we're women, but also many of us are non-binary. And also we just don't want to subscribe to the gender. And that's understandable. And because of that, there's like this low number. But it is kind of true though, because there's definitely less than 1% that participate in bug bounty because of this. But to be honest with you, it is changing over time, of course, but there are some reasons why these numbers are low. So why? It is definitely a male-dominated field. I mean, InfoSec in general, we're like 20%, right? And the thing is that in bug bounty space, we're definitely not even close to 20%. Now, the problem is that many of the forums around bug bounty are run by guys, and the people that are in there are guys, and they can be very aggressive and they can harass online communities. And it's one of the reasons why women that do participate in bug bounty in any of these forums, they'll use a fake photo and they'll also use a fake male's name to protect themselves from being harassed online. And because of these things, we have lower numbers. And then also seeing that there's hardly any women in the field, this lack of representation isn't helping us either. And so the thing is if you're interested in doing bug bounty and whatnot, there are a few people that you should follow. One is Alyssa Herrera. She's amazing. Jesse Kinzer, another amazing person. Katie Paxton Fear, also known as Insider PhD. These are the ones that I follow all the time on bug bounty. And there's a few other women, but those are the ones that I always comes to mind when I know about bug bounty. And it's sad because I still can count less than 10 women in bug bounty that I know of. And I work in the field. And so that's kind of a sad thing to know. But to be honest, things are changing, like I said. And how it's changing is that there are private groups being formed. So there are a private group on a few different bug bounty Slack groups, and they're named as Ladybug, which is interesting. Actually, I was one of the people that started like 2 of them. So there are some private groups within Slack. Also, Women Hackers, we have a private bug bounty channel and a bug bounty channel that's public. So those are very much hardcore hunters. They tend to be in the private one. The public one is for those that are interested in learning more. If you are someone who is in Women Hackers already, just DM me and I'll add you to the private one. If you're not in Women Hackers, but you want to get into bug bounty and you want that support where you don't have to worry about aggressive attacks or just being who you are and accept it as you are, join us. Also, the thing is that's also changing is that a lot of companies are pushing crowdsourcing, security companies to bring more women to participate. And you tend to see this a lot when it comes to these bug bashes or these hackathons where like Bug Bounty Hacker One or SYNAC works with companies to create these giant hacking events. And they always are asking, where are the women? I want to make sure that there's diversity being seen here. And so that is the one thing that has changed and is pushing bug bounty companies that they have to change now at this point, because other companies are wanting to practice more diversity and inclusion. And one of that is bringing more women into the bug bounty scene. So thank you to all those companies that do it. I know some of your names and will not announce it, but thank you for doing that, because putting pressure on these bug bounty platforms is the most important thing right now, so then we can have that representation. So I just want to say thank you guys for existing, and feel free to follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. And thank you to Cyberjutsu Con for having me. I'm going to turn my camera back on, and then if anyone has any questions, more than happy to answer any of them. Okay, so I got a couple questions already. How do you know the scope? Okay, so basically, how do you know you have a scope is usually on every bug bounty program. If it's public or private, it'll state what are things that are within scope. So you want to make sure you stay within that list itself. If it's a company that isn't on a bug bounty platform or doesn't have a vulnerability disclosure program themselves, then always reach out to their security team and ask them, do they have a list of things that are within scope or out of scope? Also going to disclose.io is going to be your best friend because sometimes those companies are actually listed on there with their security information. And yes, I know sometimes it's really hard. It could take hours and days to find that information, but all you have to do is go on disclose.io. Chances are they're probably on there. If they're not, let me know and I can find out for you their contact information. Any other questions? I'm not on Umbrella, but I will join Umbrella after this. But if anyone also has any remaining questions at all, they can feel free to message me on Twitter. You could DM me. My DMs are always open. Okay, got one. Can beginning bug bounty be covered in college cybersecurity courses? And thank you, Mary. Yes, please do send me all the Messdaghi questions. Let's see here. I think more and more colleges are starting to see bug bounty as something they need to. And for the longest time, even cybersecurity is still very brand new to be taught in schools. And so that's one of the things is that now they're saying, oh, this could be a good internship because let's be real, when you graduate from college, it's very hard to get a pen testing job. It can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. But the thing is that with actual practice, employers like to see that. So if you are doing any bug bounty and you had any acceptances of any submissions that you provided, and it's a public program, you can list those companies on your actual resume saying, I found bugs at the following companies. Now, if it's a private one, please make sure that you don't do that because you have agreed that you would never go out public about any of the bugs that you found for them that were accepted. All right, next one. Even with the protection available, is there current data indicating that some companies are still trying to prosecute hackers? Yes, I'm going to be honest. There are still, honestly, if the company doesn't have a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program, and they don't have their own bug bounty program, it's a real chance that you are taking. That's why it's really good is to message the company to find out if they have something within scope that you can know about if you want to find something. It's very hard to wanting to let a company know that you found a vulnerability. So the best thing you can do is usually contact a few people at the company without stating what you found and be like, hey, I found something and I don't know if it's a crucial vulnerability. I never exploited it. And I couldn't find anything about your in scope or out of scope. And I just want you to know this. And the thing to note about it is that you have to be really careful. So I do always say, please advise a legal counsel. Attorney can be a really good friend for you. EFF also has some really good resources too when you're trying to disclose something. It is really, really scary. No matter where you are in the world, it is so scary to disclose something that is not on a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program. Yeah, so I've dealt with this type of cases and I really do recommend reaching out to someone like me, for example. I can find out contact information and find out a little bit ahead of time if you're safe or not, but don't tell me what you found to keep you safe. Also keep me safe. Instead, just say if it's a 0 day or something like that, you can always say 0 day, but don't tell me too much about it. And whatever you find, no matter what it is, you do not exploit. Okay, when you exploit, you have lost. You can be prosecuted. So don't exploit, in other words. Playing CTFs. Yes, CTFs are so important to play because with CTFs, you're actually taking the knowledge that you have, or new knowledge and you're putting it into practice. So CTFs are really good because a lot of people that do bug bounty also do CTFs and vice versa, because it's a gamified way of learning and taking on new tools to be able to practice it. So yes, do CTFs. Okay, so even with what's going on today with breaches and everything, are companies more supportive with bug bounty programs or less supportive? I believe they're more supportive. If a company is doing a bug bounty program, that means they're already trusting hackers to a certain extent. So it's really important to only kind of want to tell a company if they have a bug or something or a vulnerability. You want to make sure that they have a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program, because you know they have more of an understanding of a bilateral trust agreement. So if they don't have that, once again, I'm highly skeptical. I'm always afraid about that kind of stuff. And once again, I'm not an attorney. What do you think are the most accessible bug bounties for nodes? Okay, a lot of people say recon for some reason, but I mean, they always say recon, they're low hanging fruit. But honestly, at the end of the day, find something that you're really good at and just keep doing that. So sometimes people are really good at recon. Some people are good at other things. The thing is, find your niche, your kind of thing that you're really good at, and just keep doing that. That's what a lot of well-known bug bounty hunters, they're known for doing one specific findings for a reason. And I think that is any other additional questions. I know we have like 1 minute left or two. But if anyone does have any remaining questions, do feel free to reach out, even if it's tomorrow, the next day or whatnot. I am here to help and support you. In the meantime, do feel free to check out my Twitter and take a look at the first pin tweet, because the reason is that we do need to get this petition out there and all out there. So my Twitter is Chloe Messdaghi. It is literally on the screen here. I'll share it one more time. It's right here at the bottom. There you go. And also my DMs are open on Instagram, but I'm a lot faster on Twitter because I'm more on Twitter than on Instagram. But you can follow me and ask me anything. DMs are both open on both of these channels. So whatever makes you feel more comfortable doing, you can do so.